when you're going through those hard moments, if you're going through a life ambush and you know your mission and you know your purpose, then you don't lose sight of it. If you don't know your purpose when you go through a life ambush, it's easy to get lost in the storm.
Today on the show, we have retired Navy SEAL Jason Redman. He's a New York Times bestselling author. In my opinion, Jason is a hero. I think of anybody that goes into the military as a hero, but sometimes we overlook that there are true wars being fought out there and there are true casualties. And I'm grateful to have Jason stop by here and tell us a little bit about his story and how we can overcome the stuff that's happening in our lives. Jason Redman, welcome to the show.
Bert, honored to be on, man. Money for lunch. Let's do
Money
this.
for lunch. That's right. Well, I appreciate it. And you know what? And again, I really look at your story. I'm saying this guy is a war hero, right? I mean, you first of all, you put yourself on the line like a lot of our military people do. You were shot in combat. You overcame that, and now you are helping other people overcome their situation, right? You have a great TED Talk, and I'm going to put this in the show notes. The TED Talk is awesome. It's a great hors d'oeuvre to the book Overcome. So talk a little bit about how you came up with Overcome. What was the inspiration?
Yeah, 100%. And now even more so, because a lot of people, they'll watch this and they'll say Navy SEALs are cool, or I've seen those guys on TV, but they'll say I can't relate to them. I'm an entrepreneur now. So I'm not walking the battlefields of combat anymore. I'm walking the battlefields of business, which is significantly more difficult in my opinion. Combat is pretty simple. That's the reality. I mean, and there's all kinds of, everybody has their own political views, they have their own beliefs. But at the end of the day, I learned a lot of lessons in the SEAL teams. It is a very, it is a organization that has tremendous culture, and it is built on a foundation of this no quit mindset. And that is if you think of anything else about SEALs, you understand that everybody can say, wow, these guys are tough. They're very resilient. The training is very difficult. We have a 75 to 80% attrition rate in training. But really, it was all those lessons that I learned both through training and throughout my military career in combat that now have translated into the other areas of my life. And none more so than what I call the overcome mindset. And the overcome mindset is kind of the core principles that the SEAL teams taught me. They taught me, hey, things are going to be hard. Things are going to go unfair. You're going to train and come up with the perfect plan. You'll develop the perfect plan, and then that plan is going to go train wreck wrong. And what are you going to do about it? Are you going to lay there and feel sorry for yourself, which a lot of people want to do? A lot of people buy into the victim mindset that I frequently talk about. Or are you going to get up and you're going to figure out how to navigate through it and figure out how to, either win or succeed, or sometimes we don't, sometimes we fail. And then how do we move in a different direction or find a different path? And those were all the things, that was the foundation of what the SEAL teams taught me with an overcome mindset. And I teach people both in the book and in coaching that the foundational level of it is there's three levels of building an overcome mindset. Number one, you have to have awareness that things are going to go wrong. You well know, coming from the business community, Bert, things always go wrong.
Right.
No matter how great we can plan. A great business mentor of mine said, when you launch a new business or you launch a new endeavor, it's going to take twice as long, and it's going to cost twice as much money, and it's going to have twice as many problems as you can plan for. So awareness of that is number one. I mean, we don't go into it thinking we're going to go skipping down the yellow brick road. Number two, how do we prepare for those things? And some of that is mentally. How do we mentally prepare? How do we emotionally prepare? In combat, in the military, how do we physically prepare? How do we train? How do we train our bodies? How do we train in tactics? And on the entrepreneur side, how do we financially prepare? I would say it's much more mental and emotional on the entrepreneur side, and then financial. How do we I just launched a new business last year, and we will go an entire year in the red. So how am I managing cash flow and all these things to keep this afloat? What was the plan I put in place? So that's number two, preparation. And number three is action. How do we take action? Because most people freeze up when everything starts to go wrong because number one, they weren't aware. They lived in this idealistic bubble that no, that'll never happen to me. Well, guess what? It happens to bad things happen to good people every day, man. So if you honestly think it's never going to happen to you, you're living in la la land. So being aware, preparing, and taking action to drive forward. Those are the things that helped me find success in the military. And now I'm using, and that really became the basis of this, the book, Overcome.
It's interesting. I've noticed, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I've kind of noticed that when I say we, in our society's attempt to make things easier for the next generation seems to have become
Soft.
maybe, a little bit softer, right? Because my dad was part of the great generation, right? I mean, these guys were very emotionally distant. They didn't say the I love yous. Hugging was kind of also a weird thing. You most likely get a handshake versus a hug. And then we had the baby boomers who were all about work, 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 work. And then now there's been so much said about work-life balance and trying to, I think, again, just trying to be in touch with our feelings more, that we've become softer. And just you look at, for example, high school back in the 50s, it was physically demanding to be in PE. I mean, you had to do not just jumping jacks, but push-ups, pull-ups, monkey bars. There was all sorts of expectations. Fast forward to today, and PE has changed drastically. And so I think that just overall, America has gotten away from that mindset to be tough, to overcome. And what's your take on that?
So I would agree with a lot of that. I would agree that we are fostering that taking away PT. I was just thinking about this the other day. I mean, we used to have the presidential fitness test, the standard, which I thought was great. I remember wanting to do that and wanting to place. And we look at the massive levels of obesity that we face in America and within American children. And we've taken those things away because we're building this idea that, well, that's not fair. You're discriminating against someone who maybe is not in shape. So what we're doing is we're lowering the bar down to the lowest level instead of raising the bar to a higher level and saying, hey, let's look at pulling people who are down here up because it's good for everyone. And I think right now that's the direction we're going. We're pulling the bar down, which is dangerous. And it's fostering this victim mindset of, hey, if things don't go my way, if I don't get selected for the team, or if I don't get picked up for college, or if I don't get this job, or if you don't pick me up to be a leader in this position, well, it's because you're discriminating against me because of race, creed, color, gender persuasion. I don't care what it is.
Right.
Those become the excuses instead of a little bit of self-awareness saying, hey, is there something that maybe I can do better? I mean, we need to provide the feedback so that they can grow. That's a critical thing on the other side of leadership. But I do think that it's creating this victim mindset. The overcome mindset is a victor mindset.
Right.
It says, I will get up. It says, hey, if I didn't get this job, or I didn't get picked for this team, or I didn't whatever, then I'm going to put things in place. Once again, comes back to action. We take action to change things so that we can be more successful. And one additional thing I'd like to caveat on there is this idea of, in the past, same for me. My family, my dad didn't say I love you or things like that. I actually think that is, I'll be honest, now the way I look at it, I think we were emotionally narrow. And what we've done is we've increased the spectrum on one side and said, oh, we've got to be emotionally vulnerable. But what I would dare say You need to increase it all the way across the board. Because don't get me wrong, man, I'll tell my kids I love them, but I'll go kill someone the next minute if I have to. And that's a very broad emotional spectrum, but you need to understand we need to be dangerous.
Yes.
Man is the most dangerous animal that walks this planet. At any given time, we're only 96 hours away from total chaos. Societal collapse is on a razor's thin edge. And that's the reality. It's why I train people. I tell people, hey, if you honestly think that American society can never collapse, once again, you're living in la la land. I mean, I pray it doesn't. I fought so that hopefully my kids and grandkids can have a good future. But at the same time, and I want to tell them I love them. I want my kids to know that, but I've also raised my kids to be overcomers and how to understand that there are hard times. I kind of live the mindset of what General Mad Dog Mattis said. He said, be nice to everyone you meet, but have a plan to kill them.
Absolutely. And look, I think that Jordan Peterson said the same thing. You have to be dangerous, but control that dangerous.
That's right.
And again, it goes to that mindset. We have to be willing to stand up for what we believe in. We have to be willing to fight for what we believe in. We don't have to be rude about it. We don't have to, just go off, for every little thing. But just knowing that you can fight for what you believe in, fight to protect your family, I think that's important. And I think nowadays we've become so woke that that everything is wrong, right? And to your point, that
and
if
we're
somebody
offended by everything,
you're offended
must be offended by everything.
Must be offended by everything, and if you didn't get your way, you didn't succeed. You're right. It's not your fault. It's their fault. It's somebody else.
Well, now oh, I didn't get this, so I'm a victim. Yeah,
right.
How about maybe you weren't qualified? Have you looked at that?
Well, you know what, and to your point, there's been this big push for diversity in everything. And look, I believe in diversity. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Cuba, but at the same time, I think qualification should come first, and you start from there. And just to pick somebody to fill a diversity goal is no different than having affirmative action for years, which again, affirmative action helped. There was a lot of people who were stuck in the wrong mindset, but at the same time, qualifications count, and that should be first.
100%. Standards matter. I mean, it goes back to what we, talked about before. Instead of maintaining the bar here and encouraging people to move themselves up to the bar, what we tend to be doing lately is just pushing the bar down. And it's creating a degradation across. I mean, you look at our public education. I mean, we are bombing on all our tests across the board. American children, English, mathematics, science, our STEM programs are struggling to get kids that are qualified. They're struggling to recruit kids into engineering and some of these key programs because they were just not academically preparing them for the upper level. And a lot of that has to do is we keep lowering the standards because the argument is, well, it's unfair. If some kids can't make the grade, then it's unfair to them. Well, I'll never forget when my son was in kindergarten, he started, my son is a August baby. So we probably should have waited a year. He was the youngest in his class when we put him into kindergarten, and he had some he had some learning disabilities back then when he was starting in school. And hindsight being 2020 as parents, we should have waited, but we didn't. So we got to the end of the year in the public school system, and at the end of the year, they told us, they said, hey, your son, the other kids, the average thing is here, your son is here. But we'll gladly move him ahead if you want us to. That way, he can move on with his peers. And my wife and I were like, no, if he's not at the level he should be at, then, and we did, we pulled him and took him to another school and a private school that could work with him directly and help him grow. And he's gone on to do great things. But I was just fascinated by that, hey, if you want us to, we'll just go ahead and move him forward, even though he has not met the standard.
Right. Yeah. And that's also a new thing, because when I was growing up, you didn't meet the standard, you just didn't go. You weren't, they didn't just let you slip on to the next class or next level. You had to repeat that class. And, further to your point, I can't remember, I believe it's Wisconsin, but it's Wisconsin or Michigan. Anyway, one of the school districts in one of those states is now getting away from the basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, saying that it's too hard and we're not going to make it a standard anymore. How can you not make the basics a standard? It's just like, we're not going to teach them English anymore. It's too hard. I mean, it's just crazy. And our society is going to crumble. Like you said, we're going to keep lowering the bar to the point of breakage.
Yeah, standards matter, accountability matters, and right now there's a degradation in that. And it's hard to build an overcome mindset if all you ever tell people is, hey, if it's hard, don't do it. If it's hard, your comfort is paramount. And that is a very strong message that's being spread right now. We need to break that message. Parents, you need to break that message. Force your kids to do hard things. Force your kids to go play a sport. If they don't like it, force them to finish no matter what. That was one of the rules we had in our household. Like, no matter what you start, you will finish. I don't care how much you hate it. You will at least finish the season, and then you'll go find something new after that. But you have to finish, because that's kind of part of life. We have to learn to deal with things and people and systems we don't like, until you reach a place where you're like, okay, now I'm ready to move on. If all we ever do is quit right out of the gates, you're conditioning people to do that. And that's really what's happening. We're seeing it across society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So your story, which is incredible. Again, guys, you can check out Jason's story. So you were shot in combat, took a round to the face. And what I found extraordinary, I mean, that in itself is extraordinary because you lived, you got shot like 8 or 9 times.
Yeah, 8 times between my body armor and body, 3 times to the body, 5 times body armor, helmet.
And what I find interesting, first of all, about that story, and you talk about this in one of your talks, is that you had this little voice whisper in your ear, you got to take your side plates. Talk about the side plates and this little whisper.
Yeah, listen to your sixth sense. I mean, it's something I talk about in the book, Overcome. When we talk about awareness, there's all kinds of indicators in this life. The human body is able to process a lot of information, and oftentimes we see, we hear things, clues, and we either ignore them or we just miss them, whatever it is. And oftentimes we can go back later and we'll see them. It makes sense. In combat, we called those things indicators. They were, is there an indicator that there's an ambush around this corner here? What are signs? If we were to go into a very populated place that's normally very populated, bustling with activity, and all of a sudden you come around the corner to one of those places and it's totally a ghost town, something is about to happen. The people know. Usually that was a precursor to an ambush or an IED attack or whatever it was. Life is similar to that. There are indicators that come along that let you know, and sometimes that can be that little voice in your head. So that night before we went out on that mission, Special Operations has a lot of latitude. We have primary gear that everybody has to wear. It's a requirement, but then you get a little bit of latitude, and you may decide to carry a different weapon than from another guy. You may decide to carry more grenades than another guy, depending on what you're doing on that mission or how you're doing things. And we all had to wear our front plates and our rear plates, but side plates were an optional thing. They add weight. And everything you carry into combat is weight. We have a saying, ounces equal pounds. And when you're patrolling miles and miles and climbing over walls or potentially fighting people or running or whatever you're doing, you want to minimize weight. So for me, I typically didn't wear my side plates unless I was in the vehicle all night. And then I wanted that extra protection for IEDs and stuff like that. But on that night, yeah, we were getting ready for that mission. I was not going to be in the vehicles. I was in the assault, and a little voice said, "Hey, man, wear your side plates." And thankfully, I listened because I took a round right off my right side plate. That would have, I don't know, it would have done a lot of damage. It probably would have blown out my kidney, might have got me in the spine. I don't know. But that side plate saved me. That same night before I got shot, as we were pushing into this dense vegetation where we knew the enemy had run into this field, man, my spidey sense was going crazy. Like, hey, and it just everything was saying something's about to happen. And in that case, I didn't listen to it. I told myself, well, that's just fear. And I squashed it, and we continued to push forward and walked right into that ambush. So I talk to people about, hey, sixth sense is a powerful thing. If nothing else, grab a friend in business or your spouse or whoever it is and say, hey, I've got this feeling right now. What do you think about this? If they say, yeah, I'm feeling that too, then maybe you need to take a step back and evaluate what's happening there. We should have done that night. I talked to my team leader about it later. So yeah, listen to that little voice in your head. Don't let it stop you. That's a big thing. Some people allow that to become the voice of fear that stops them from driving forward. It should merely be a very quick evaluation. And once again, awareness, preparation, action. So awareness, hey, there's a problem. Have we prepared for this? Yes. Can we mitigate this? Like when I look back on that night, we would have done things differently. There were other ways that we could attack that problem than just pushing straight through. So that, I want to put that out there. Don't allow it to become an excuse not to do things because you're afraid.
Yeah, and I think that's a great what do you call it? Little point to make, because we do get that sixth sense. So you can pick things up, and then like you said, now that you're aware that, hey, something is giving me whatever, let me reevaluate. What else do I need to do? Maybe I need to take a different route. So I'm glad you said that. Don't let the fear stop you, because sometimes you have to separate the two. What I found extraordinary about your story is that your overcome mindset kicked in pretty quickly, because you're at the hospital and you wrote out not just a sign, but a very long kind of, an amazing sign. I think, and again, I want you to tell your story, but this is the thing that impressed me the most about you, Jason, is that you are in the hospital. I don't know, you were in there, I don't know if it was a week or two, but fairly soon after arriving, you began that overcome mindset, and you wrote out this sign. Talk about this.
Yeah, 100%. And it was about 10 days that I was into the hospital. But there's an important thing we need to discuss here. One, I tell people an overcome mindset cannot be turned on overnight, or in the moment. You have to build an overcome mindset over time. And how do you do that? Well, you have to do hard things. To become a more resilient entrepreneur, you have to go through fires and trials. To become a better fighter, you have to get beat sometimes. To become a stronger, more resilient human, you have to fail and fall down and get yourself back up. That's the reality. So an interesting journey for me. A lot of people who look me up online think that, oh man, battlefield injury, shot in the face, sign on the door, all these things. There's a real large part of my story that most people aren't aware of because it doesn't get all the highlight. But it's the basis of my first book, Trident. And that is, I failed as a young leader, as a young officer. I was an enlisted SEAL. I'd done really well. I got recommended for a commission and became a SEAL officer. And then I kind of lost my way. I kind of let ego and arrogance get in the way, started making some poor decisions. And All of that culminated with a bad call on the battlefield in Afghanistan in 2005, and I almost got myself kicked out of the SEAL teams. And it took 2 years of rebuilding my reputation and credibility to really get embraced back into the community as a leader. As a matter of fact, the firefight where I was shot was almost the culmination of that journey. I would say the culmination happened a couple of months earlier. We got into a huge firefight, a very complicated firefight, and myself and my team handled that very well. I would kind of say that was the high point, the full circle moment. But it was only 3 months later when I was shot up in this gunfight, this machine gun ambush. So I tell people that because that journey of failing as a leader is the hardest thing I've ever been through. Like literally, I put a gun in my mouth in Afghanistan and thought about taking and almost took my life. Thank God I didn't. I walked that road and it was hard. I had guys who did not want me there. They were like, "Hey, you're that guy who screwed up in Afghanistan. You're dangerous." I heard a lot of that on a regular basis, and welcome, welcome to the world of haters and naysayers. I mean, it's going to be out there. So part of the overcome mindset is ignoring that and believing in yourself. And that was hard. Don't get me wrong. I had my doubts deep, man. Frequently I had doubts like, can I do this? Like, I don't know. Can I continue?
Right.
But all I said is I'm going to continue to drive forward. I tell you all that because when I was in that hospital bed and I was laying there they were telling me years of surgeries. In the beginning, they were talking about amputating my arm. The structural integrity of my skull was compromised. They were talking about they would have to rebuild my skull and the whole right side of my face. And I remember like thinking, how am I going to do this? Like I remember thinking to myself, so what you're telling me is my special operations career is over. I'm going to be permanently disabled and I'm going to be forever disfigured. And then I looked back and I said, you know what, man? You just walked the hardest road you've ever walked. You climbed out of that deep, dark hole of failure and climbed back up to the top to lead some of the best warriors on this planet into combat. And the road is no different. The formula is no different. I had walked that path. Lead yourself, lead others, lead always. That was the formula I was following. And I said that the formula is the same, man. Whether you're leading from a boardroom or the battlefield or a classroom or I don't care, a sanitation department, leadership is leadership. And self-leadership being one of the most critical things you can do. And I told myself the formula is the same. And all you have to do is just drive forward. You put one foot in front of the other and you don't feel sorry for yourself. You get up and you drive forward. You get off the X is one of the sayings we have in special operations and I talk about in the book. And that was kind of that defining moment when I wanted to feel sorry for myself. And I was like, that is not going to happen. And that's how the sign on the door came to be.
Yeah, and it's incredible because it's not just what I would consider a simple little sign. You guys went into some detail. I think that I'll read it out here. It's basically the sign was, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if I miss any part here. Attention to all who enter here. If you're coming into this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds I received, I got in a job that I loved, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I make a full recovery. What is full? That is an absolute utmost physically. I have the ability to recover, and then I'm going to push that about 100% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense, rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. I love that. I mean, that sign should hang in just about everybody's home because
and that sign has
incredible.
gone on to motivate millions and millions of people. It's been amazing, the power, and there wasn't a whole lot of thought that went into it. And what I try and tell people is, man, when you're going through hard times, when the rug has been pulled out from underneath you, when you've been shot or punched in the face, you have a choice. No one forces you to lay there and feel sorry for yourself. You have a choice. I had a choice. I could lay there and be a victim, or I could get up and be a victor. And I chose to be a victor. I mean, it didn't mean it was hard. I mean, it didn't mean it was easy. It took 4 years and 40 surgeries to put me back together. I never was able to operate on the battlefield as a SEAL again from my injuries, but I still stayed. I finished my military career on my terms. I did, 5 more years, 6 more years after that before I retired from the military. So yeah, I tell people, like, you have a choice. Everyone's going to get hit by adversity. Everyone's going to get hit by what I call life ambushes, these
Right.
catastrophic moments that will just crush you, no different than that ambush I encountered in Iraq. The difference is mine was the bullets and bombs of battle. Life ambushes are the bullets and bombs of life. But no matter what, you have a choice in how you're going to deal with it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's remarkable about that situation there, when you're in the hospital, you still were connected to. I mean, your jaw was wired shut. You're in a feeding tube. It wasn't like it was a simple hand me the pen, let me get to work. You were still in a mess.
I was at the very beginning. They weren't sure if they were going to save my arm. They weren't sure on a lot of things. I mean, unfortunately, when you have severe battlefield injuries, there is no clear path. If anybody, you can up on the wall, that's a artist's representation of my skull. The bullet hole in the forehead was actually in my helmet, but all that damage to the right side of my face was taken straight off the CT scan. And there is no textbook formula. At that level of catastrophic damage to the human body, doctors have to figure it out on the go. That's why they created this acrylic model of my skull to figure out how to put me back together. Same with my arm. I took 2 rounds, 1 round in the bicep and 1 round in the forearm, totally destroyed my elbow. And originally they thought the better plan was to amputate above the arm. And thankfully I had a doctor who said, I think we can save it. So yeah, it's in the beginning, it's always easy to say, man, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but you get through it by continuing to drive forward. You just one step every day, you keep grinding. It will be painful, it will be uncomfortable, but slowly it gets better and you are advancing, even if it's only by little tiny, millimeters.
So in the book, the first chapter, which I love the first chapter, it's simply entitled Survive, because that's really the most important thing is to survive. And so you've already mentioned getting off the X. So explain to everyone what is it meant by getting off the X?
Yeah, so getting off the X is the point of attack. It's the point of catastrophic event. It's the point of an ambush. In combat, it could be an IED attack, a sniper attack. It could be an enemy ambush, like what we found ourselves in life. I describe the X can be a lot of things. I mean, it could be the ending of a relationship. It could be a business failure, lawsuit, bankruptcy. I mean, there's all kinds of things. I mean, we could, some of your top employees suddenly all quit overnight. You're now in a major life ambush on how do you manage that in your business. I mean, these are all life-threatening illness, injury,
Right.
sexual trauma, and some of the higher life ambushes, the unexpected loss of a loved one, unexpected loss of a child. So these are all what I call major life ambushes. And oftentimes when you're in a major attack, it's great to think you can overcome it and win. But sometimes winning is merely surviving. Sometimes in major life ambush, when we talk about a devastating ambush, I mean, my teammates and I are lucky to have survived that ambush. It was a very well executed ambush. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for A, the ferocity that my team fought back, and B, the Air Force AC-130 gunship that was up overhead that brought in the fire mission, closest fire mission ever executed in the Iraq War. We actually called rounds directly on our position. And that's what enabled us to get out of that fight. And we, several of us, half the team were all shot up. but we survived. And sometimes in life, it's the same thing. In order to get off the X, the first step is just to survive, to live, to preserve your business or your family or relationship or whatever it is, to weather that first attack and to come through it and say, okay, God, that sucked. Now we got to do battle damage assessment and figure out how do we pull things together and how do we drive forward from here. And that's the idea of getting off the X. Um, a lot of times I try and tell people there's going to be a first level of attack, and then there's kind of the secondary ambush. So for me, the actual battlefield ambush was kind of the first one, and the second one was all the years of surgeries and being put back together. And life ambushes happen that way a lot too. You have some major crisis that occurs, and then we have the secondary and tertiary effects that come about from that ambush, that attack.
Absolutely. And I just love that. It's a simple, almost intuitive thing to survive. Hey, I just got to get to the next couple of steps. And something that, again, this is the first chapter of the book, Overcome. It's available on Amazon or your favorite books. I'm going to put some links here in the show notes. But after getting off the X, the next step is abandoning panic or abandon panic. And I think this might be the toughest things for a lot of people to do, because that fear grips you, and sometimes we feed it. And it's one of the hardest things to do is to abandon that panic.
That's where training plays in. That's where an overcome mindset plays in. One of the things is, once again, awareness, preparation, action. I live a life, and I talk to people about this, and some people say, wow, that's really dark. I live a life where I have contemplated, what would happen if I lost my wife? What would happen if I lost one of my kids? And maybe that is dark thinking, but it's reality. There are people, I had teenage kids out learning to drive on the streets, and guess what? Every day in America, a young teenager dies behind an automobile accident. And there is a family that is grieving for that young teenage driver. So to think that that'll never happen to you is folly. You pray it won't, and I pray for all of you out there that never happens to you. But so if you take that formula and apply it to the other areas of your life, and you think about, well, man, could I be diagnosed with a disease? Well, yeah, you could be. Could my business fail? Well, absolutely it could. Could the market suddenly tank and everything dries up overnight? Or what if the dollar fails? Or, what if China suddenly attacks us? There's all kinds of what ifs. Now, here's the difference. We don't live our life in fear. You have to accept awareness. What have I done to prepare? So preparation is how we build ourselves mentally and emotionally. And sometimes it's just that mental awareness. That is how it enables you to manage the panic. And when we talk about abandoning panic, I actually did a little video on this on YouTube not that long ago, the difference between fear and terror. So most times when people get into a major crisis, terror paralyzes them into inaction. They're so overwhelmed with everything that happened. And because there was no preparation for it, whether they ignored it or whether they intentionally just, procrastinated, whatever reasons, or maybe it really did just totally come out of the blue and they never saw it. It freezes them into inaction. And that's the most dangerous thing when you're on the X. Inaction will lead to your death, because what will happen is you'll bleed out, whether, if we're talking about, physical, if you were shot, if you don't move and get out of that gunfight, you will bleed out physically. But where I see it with other individuals is they bleed out mentally, emotionally, or in businesses, they bleed out financially. So having that mindset of preparation, like, oh my God, I never thought this could happen, but at least I accepted the fact that it could happen. So when it does happen, we're not so frozen. Instead, it becomes fear. And fear, we can navigate through. How do we do that? Well, that's courage. That you can't have courage without fear. So in the face of fear, we say, okay, we have to drive forward. If it's in business, if it's in your family, or, God forbid, it's a, life or death situation, hopefully you're telling other people, let's go, come on. we got to get off this axe and drive forward. And that's just managing fear. And that can be done by, we go back full circle, by doing hard things, by doing things that get you out of your comfort zone, by having to deal with fear and still be able to take action.
Absolutely. And to your point, so we have a saying at our household that we can do hard things. And I've changed it just recently to say that we were designed to do hard things. That, I believe, is the human spirit. When you think about all the crazy crap that as humans we've done, to think that, hey, we can survive in Alaska, that to me is just crazy. And people for I don't know how long now, hundreds of years, have survived in Alaska. That is all mindset. That is somebody who said, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. So I think that I believe in God, and I think God designed us to do hard things. And the harder things that we do, that's when we get a certain level of fulfillment. You talk about building your courage. That comes from, like you said, it comes from doing hard things. And the more we push ourselves out of the comfort zone, the better life gets, the easier life gets.
Yes. I wanted to pull up. Oh, yeah, you were talking about doing hard things and being fascinated with things we've done in the past. I read a book last year called In the Kingdom of Ice by Hampton Sides. It is an amazing book about they were trying to sail way back in the 1800s, in the mid 1800s. It was post Civil War. They believed still that you could sail through the North Pole. And there were all these different theories. And these guys basically went on this expedition and gone for 2.5 years. Almost everybody died. There were only a few survivors. But the survivors talked about how they survived in the most, negative 50-degree temperatures nightly with their ship frozen in the ice and being cracked on its side. Their furs totally soaked the majority of the time. And guys literally having their toes cut off from frostbite, but continuing to trek. It's the most, I read it and I was like, God dang, man, I think I'm a pretty tough guy, but holy smokes. So yeah, the power of the human spirit is amazing. And I agree. We're getting softer as a society. If you go back hundreds of years, we lived very hard lives. We lived in the woods and we cut down trees and we made our homes and we farmed our land and we hunted beasts, and that's how we lived. And then the Industrial Revolution came along. We still had to work pretty hard, pretty physical labor for most people. And now we've gotten into the computer age, and now we're getting into AI. So the society's getting easier and easier. So if you don't do hard things, you are going to reach a point where I don't know, in some ways we're already there, where people, the smallest little adversity makes them collapse.
Right. Yeah. And it's just an incredible thing. And I you know what, I think that our government has leaned too much into that softness, into that wokeness. I think that when I say our government, both sides, definitely one more than the other, but both sides have given in to this tiny, tiny little minority.
Yeah.
The smallest group have become so powerful just because they don't mind calling themselves victim and telling how everybody has treated them unfairly and that they should have special treatment and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's this tiny little group, people. We're talking not even a 0.5%.
And here's what's interesting. If you go back and look, nowhere ever in the history of the world have individuals achieved high levels of success with that formula. If you look at every highly successful society, company, team, never once do you see them like, hey, we're a bunch of victims, so we're going to victimhood our way to success. It doesn't exist. You will not find it. So it's amazing to me that there are people that are buying into this. This idea, I am a huge fan of capitalism. I'm a huge fan of democracy and our republic and free market economy I believe in. And this idea that's kind of pervading right now is socialism, which you coming from Cuba, it's amazing to me how you guys who came from socialist countries are the biggest advocates against it because you've lived it.
Right.
Yet we have all these young people who are like, socialism would be great.
Yeah.
And we're like, nowhere in the world has it ever worked. What
Right.
makes you think that suddenly it's going to work here?
Well, and what's so funny, again, when you're young and dumb, and when I say dumb, inexperienced, young and inexperienced.
Exactly. Let's say inexperienced, because I don't want to. I feel like it's a disservice when we have reached a point in society where all we do is throw out names.
Right.
And I think it's inexperienced or unwilling to challenge your beliefs.
Right. And when you're young and inexperienced, you believe these things because, first of all, it seems sexy. Hey, I'm going to get paid for doing nothing. There's a certain level of sex appeal. That'd be cool, man. But you don't realize, because of your lack of experience, you don't realize the fact of how much growth and confidence that you get from doing hard things, from putting yourself through school when you're broke and you have to work a full-time job and work at school full-time, or you're starting your business and you have a couple $1,000 and you're working 24/7 and all that stuff. Doing these hard things builds that confidence, builds that self-esteem. And when you look at the people that we in society respect, people, again, like Elon Musk, or you look at your favorite athlete, they've gone through some stuff. I mean, Kobe Bryant, talked about all the training he would do. Same thing with Michael Jordan.
Right.
There's nobody out there that is at this level of life because it was given to them or because they had it easy. It's the reverse. They failed and they had to overcome. They dealt with lawsuits, betrayal, all that other stuff. And then if people want to see what a free handout socialistic type experiment looks like, look at what our government, again, this is an unexpected consequence, but look what happens or continues to happen with the Native Americans, where when you go to the reservation, it is like a third world country. It is horrible living conditions, drug use.
But and like many socialist areas, there is a group that has done very well who tends to seize power and control everything, no different than governments. And if you look at you look at North Korea, you look at Russia, you look at China, there is a large group who's doing very well. And then everyone else is barely struggling to make it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I look at, again, in the reservations, the people who have done well, guess what? Most of them are entrepreneurs. Most of them have gotten away from the reservations, or they're doing something else, or they're involved with the casinos. They're doing something to better themselves. But again, all we have to do is, you mentioned Cuba. Yeah, a lot of people don't relate to that. It's far away. How about the Native Americans in our backyard? Look at what's happened to them because they get all this free money.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah, it's about getting harder or doing hard things. And I do believe that the harder you are on yourself, the easier life becomes. And just a real simple example, if you're willing to study 10 hours a day, most likely you are going to graduate at a high level versus if you're screwing off and waiting till the last minute.
And I'll add one additional point of what I talk about in the Overcome Mindset. There's no guarantee of success. You can study 10 hours a day. You can bust your ass in this life, and it doesn't guarantee success. You will be better. And if you're willing to continue to grind, sometimes the path that you decided to take may not be the right path. So now you may go in a different direction. I guarantee if you're willing to grind, you're going to learn so much more than by sitting back and not doing it. But I meet people who will say to me, oh, working hard doesn't guarantee anything. Well, you're right. That's life. Sometimes things don't, unfold according to plan. And an Overcome Mindset accepts that. An Overcome Mindset accepts that, hey, there is a potential for failure. This may not happen, but guess what? I'm not going to lay there. It's not the end. Just like I talk about in my TED talk, it only becomes a new beginning. Now I'm moving in a different direction. And I think that's part of it. I meet so many people that are like, well, I wanted to do this. And if I can't do this, then my life's over. Well, I often joke about, I'd love to have played in the NFL. I I was a terrible football player. I was too small. I was too slow. I lacked the skill, all of the things. I never, ever had never a remote chance of ever playing in the NFL. I love football though. So, I mean, and if I got out of the SEAL teams, like, yeah, man, I want to be a linebacker. There's no amount of money, steroids, training, coaches on this planet, in this universe, that could ever get me to where I'd ever play in the NFL. It's a pipe dream. So, sometimes there are paths that aren't available to us. But the difference between successful people is they say, okay, that road closed. That's the end. Now let's move on to this new beginning.
Yes, and I think one of the big takeaways from the first chapter, and I think this is the one that slows people down the most, is that acceptance you're talking about. When you own it, when you accept it, and you say, okay, this is the cards that I'm dealt. I am now going to start figuring it out. The quicker you get to there, the faster you can take action. And I think what a lot of people get bogged down is, this isn't my fault. I gave this marriage everything and it fell apart, or I gave my business everything and now they fired me, or whatever. A good example of like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, it gets kicked out of his own company, Apple, for many years. And he could have sat there and said, this is crazy. I've been betrayed, blah, blah, blah. But he said, okay, I accept it. He started building another company. In fact, Pixar is one of the companies that he started, along with Next Computer and something else. But I think, and I want to get your take on this, acceptance is the thing that holds people back the longest.
100%. I often talk about when people are stuck on the X. We'll talk about if you read the book Overcome, we talk a lot about this. People get stuck on the X. We have some terrible thing happen to us and we just get stuck. It's been amazing. I've had so many people over the years since I wrote that book, or when I come speak at conferences, that will come up to me and say, oh my God, I didn't even realize I've been stuck on the X for 5 years, 10 years since my business failed, since I lost my spouse, whatever it is, whatever major event happened to them. Because what so many people tend to do when we have some sort of major the end moment, some major life ambush, we do one of three things. Number one, we spend all our time looking back at the past. I want back my life before this bad thing happened. I've heard this so much since COVID. Businesses that went out of businesses since COVID, and I meet people who haven't reinvented themselves, and all they talk about is, if only I had my business, if only I had my gym back or my restaurant back before COVID. Bro, that ship has sailed. So number two, they look forward and they say, well, it's not fair. I should be here. I should have achieved this level of success. This was supposed to be the best year we ever had. I should be celebrating this anniversary or this birthday with this person. This should have been the year that I made millions. And they didn't, because obviously something happened. And then number three, which slows people down the most, is the blame game. They look for someone or something to blame. They're the reason why this failed. My spouse is the reason our marriage failed, or my business partner who took all this money is the reason our business failed. And the reality is, maybe that's true. But even if it is, it's not going to get you off the X or driving forward. You're just wasting time. And the longer you sit on the X, it's like quicksand. The more it pulls you down and the harder it is to get up and move. So you can't change the past. The only thing we can do is shape the future. If you still want those things you're seeing in the future, guess what? You need to chart a different path. It's a new path to get to those things. And the blame game is never going to work. So that's why acceptance is the biggest thing. We have to accept this happened. And then we have to accept that we have to drive forward. And most of the time, I don't want to say all of the time. I want to say probably 80% of the time, you played a part in it. So no matter how much you want to say, maybe you want to say to me, oh, my business partner stole all our money. Well, did you have all the safeguards in place to prevent that?
Right.
I mean, what things could we have done better? So what are the lessons learned that we can take from this and say, okay, I'm never going to allow that to happen again. I'm accepting it. Now I'm driving forward.
Absolutely. I think one of my favorite things that I've learned over the last decade, uh, and I believe it was Tony Robbins who said this, it might have been somebody else, maybe, but life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And again, that's that mindset shift, right? Like you said, I can sit there and have a pity party. I can blame people, but if I change and say, okay, what can I take from this? What am I learning here? I'm being forced to pivot. I'm going to accept it and make the best of it. Again, life is happening for you. That's a huge thing.
Yeah.
All right. So the book, and I want to give the full title because it's a great book. It's Overcome, Crush Adversity with the Leadership Techniques of America's Toughest Warriors. I got to ask you this. Here you are, you're heading towards SEAL training. You obviously already had kind of a mental tough kind of thinking. What was the thing that made you want to get involved in the SEALs?
I mean, as a young kid, I grew up in the GI Joe generation, and I grew up in a family of service. I mean, my whole family had served in some capacity. My dad had was the one who actually told me about the SEAL teams. He was a Army airborne instructor up until the early 2000 SEALs, including me in 1996. I went through airborne school with the Army. So my dad had met some SEALs and just said, "Hey, you may want to check this out." He said, "These guys are considered to be some of the toughest in the military. Their training is considered to be the toughest." And I don't know why, it just appealed to me. I was not this super tough kid. I wanted to do it. And for some reason, it aspired to me. That hurdle of going through the toughest training in the US military, I said, I want that. And of course, I had lots of people tell me that I couldn't do it, but that fueled my fire. That even drove me to do it more, that everybody told me you'll never make it. So I will say use those things, on your entrepreneurial journey, on whatever journey you're on. If you got a goal and people tell you can't do it, use that as fire. And you don't have to be a jerk about it. I'm kind of a big fan of let your successes speak for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. I think that what's the old saying is you what do you call it? Walk softly and carry a big stick. And I think that the more successful you become, the less you worry about other people's opinion. I mean, we should not worry about other people's opinions to begin with. But if you're focused on your mission, if you're focused on improving yourself, other people's opinions simply don't matter anyway. And you don't have to prove anything to anybody, because the reality is, whether you're successful or not, people are going to talk about you. And as they see you become more successful, it's not like, again, a lot of people are still going to talk bad about you. You might have your supporters that are going to pat you on the back and say, you're doing a great job. We believe in you, whatever. But the majority of people are going to be jealous. They're going to say, oh, he got lucky, or he's lying, or whatever. It just doesn't matter.
You're always going to have haters, and the higher you're in the spotlight, the more you'll have haters. I mean, it's interesting. This weekend, I did a Memorial Day post about my thoughts on Memorial Day. And it is right now, I think it's the biggest post I've ever done. It's approaching 7 million views right now. But what's interesting is most people are like, "Thank you. This view is amazing. I love what you're saying." That's the vast majority. People thank me for my service, the loss of friends, all these things. But there's 10% that are like, "We hate you. You suck. You went to war and killed people." And, all the different conspiracy theories that people want to buy into, involving, your friends died for a lie and all kinds of different things. So what? Guess what? Everyone's always going to have their opinion. If you run your path and you believe in what you're doing, then just accept the fact that there's always going to be someone that's got something negative to say.
Absolutely. And here's the secret. It took me a while to learn this. Whether they hate you or love you, you get paid the same amount of money. In some cases, if you get a lot of hate, for the sake of the algorithms, it's going to push the post, the article, the mention that much higher. So if you're getting a lot of activity, 50% of it is love and 50% of it is hate or whatever, it's still being shown to people. It's still going to help you be successful. You still get paid. So it's okay. I want to talk about this. I know we're short on time, but I want to talk about, again, the second chapter is about leading yourself. And specifically, it talks about clarifying your mission. And I think, again, this is one of those things, it's not as bad. It doesn't hold people up as bad as accepting the situation. But I think it's, again, a little bit of a stumbling block about clarifying your mission. Any insights on this? How can we clarify our mission?
Yeah, I use military terms because obviously coming from a military background, but mission equals purpose. So what is your purpose in this life? And I think there's a lot of people who walk through this life and they don't really know the answer to that. They've never actually sat down and said, who do I really want to be? They just kind of go through the motions of life. And I would challenge you to very quickly figure that out. It's going to help drive many of the decisions you make in your life. And it also helps you tremendously when you're going through those hard moments. If you're going through a life ambush and you know your mission and you know your purpose, then you don't lose sight of it. If you don't know your purpose when you go through a life ambush, it's easy to get lost in the storm because you don't have a course. So I challenge people to figure that out. In the military, we had a very clearly defined mission, whether that was being a part of the SEAL teams and the culture of the SEAL teams, or it was a very deliberate mission. You're going after this specific enemy, this leader, or whatever it is. I tell people to do that in life. My point man planner really is all about that. It is about deciding and trying to come up with what is your mission statement. Franklin Covey had these, writing out your mission statement. I do the same thing. It's no different than that, but it's just, who do you want to be in this life? And I even break it down to, at your funeral, what do you want people to say about you? Do you want them to say, man, Bert, he did a lot of different things in life, but none of them really mattered, or are they going to say, man, Bert was a go-getter, man. He motivated and inspired everybody around him, man. And he helped make people better. Understanding that allows you to really have conviction in the things that you're doing. So I talk about that, having conviction in your mission and understanding it.
Absolutely. I love the fact that you're asking people who, not how. Who do you want to be, not how are you going to get there? Because if you can figure out the who, the how takes care of itself. You can, once you decide, okay, I'm going to get into the military and become a Navy SEAL, you can figure out the how, right? Or I'm going to become a surgeon or an entrepreneur or whatever. And then something that struck me while I'm listening to you, and I've mentioned Elon Musk a couple of times already, but so there is Elizabeth Holmes, who started
Theranos?
Yeah, Theranos or Toronto's or whatever,
yeah.
the little blood thing. And here's the difference when you lose your mission or you lose who you are versus when you don't. So Elon Musk was 2 years late or over 2 years late getting his first batch of cars delivered. He was having all sorts of problems. He was going through a divorce. He was working 22 hours a day, on the verge of mental breakdown. Some people are suing him because, again, he's 2 years late with his cars, but he holds the course because he knows who he is. He believes in himself. I will get this stuff delivered. Now, Elizabeth Holmes was several years behind. And instead of just telling people, listen, our first try failed, she lost sight of who she was. She lost sight of her mission, and she started lying to the public, and she started fudging the numbers. and that's why she's in jail.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the big takeaway. If she would have stuck to her guns, would she have lost? She would have had some haters. She would have lost investors. She would have lost some supporters. But so what? She could have just said, I still believe in this. We're going to keep doing it. And it would have been a different story.
No, it's true. And that's what makes the difference. And, so many people have never done it. That sign became my new mission statement. I often talk about that in a talk. Man, 4 years, 40 surgeries was hard. I had a lot of setbacks. And frequently when I was struggling, that sign, it didn't go to it now hangs in the wounded ward at Walter Reed, but we dedicated that later. So when I was still going through my surgeries, it was in my room, and it became a reminder like, hey man, you're struggling. I know you want to feel sorry for yourself, but that's who you are. So you need to get up and drive forward. And I think we all need reminders like that. And a mission statement, a purpose statement reminds you of who you are when things get hard or when things are going off course, so that you don't start, morally breaking, that your moral compass is strong. Your direction is strong. My Point Man Planner is about that. It's about defining your mission, setting your course, which are your long-term and short-term goals. It's about looking at the indicators and risk assessment, and then it's about getting off the X when things go wrong. So I think that really is the secret to success in this life. If you have a strong purpose and you know who you are, yeah, you'll have setbacks, but you'll always get back on course because you have conviction in your belief in your purpose.
Absolutely. Again, if you're doing anything worthwhile, you're going to have setbacks. It's just part of the plan, and nobody gets around it. It doesn't matter. You look at oh my goodness, I think it's Katzenberger. At one point he was the head of Disney, and then you had I'm blanking on her name, but she at one point was running Hewlett Packard and eBay. So you had these two people, hugely successful. They raised $2 billion for their streaming service, which was called Quibi, and it failed within 6 months. They gave up. I should say they gave up after 6 months. Their mission statement, I don't think, was clear. They ended up giving out of the $2 million, they burned through a billion. I'm sorry, out of the $2 billion, they burned through $1 billion, and they gave $1 billion back. And I think that, first of all, here are very successful people, well funded. They couldn't make it work. Part of the reason, my opinion is they weren't clear about their mission. They weren't clear about, okay, this is what we're all about. It seemed like they were just jumping on the streaming bandwagon because so many people were doing it. And these guys had a great reputation. And like I said, well funded. They still had many setbacks, enough that after 6 months, they quit.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I want to say again, thank you so much. In the show notes today, I'm going to put down your book, all your books, as well as your pinpoint planner. I think that sounds like a great thing for people to invest in. And Jason, I want to thank you, first of all, for serving our country, for leading our troops into battle, and for being on the show. I appreciate that very much, and just wish you continued success, my friend.
Bert, my honor, man. Yeah, and anybody can find me at jasonredman.com. If any of you are looking for a speaker, I won Military Speaker of the Year award in 2021. So I definitely can come in and deliver a very powerful message, closing or opening keynote for you guys. And all of my books are on my website, signed copies of my book on my website if you guys want a signed copy.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And again, he absolutely will blow the doors away at your convention or your corporate meeting. He's got a very easy speaking style. You can check him out on YouTube, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Jason, thank you so much. Look forward to having you back again.
Bert, my honor, man. Thank you.